Thank you, Pastor Juniper, and thank you, everyone, for taking some time out of your busy and very precious schedules for tonight's discussion. It's a really energizing topic. It's property management. And as you have already talked about, it covers property management covers a lot of things, right? Um, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the Church Property Resource Hub and also kind of how we can start thinking about using our land and buildings differently. Because we are talking about property, which is about buildings and land, we always start with a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that the congregations of the Greater Milwaukee Synod meet and worship on the ancestral lands of the Potawatomi, Ojibwa, Ottawa, Fox, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sauk, and Oneida people. We also acknowledge that the legacies of violence, displacement, dispossession, migration, and trauma still impact these communities, and we invite all our congregations and leaders to learn more about this painful history and to explore ways to bring about justice, even as we strive to be respectful stewards of this land. And so as you bring some of this conversation back to your church, we ask that you hold this acknowledgement in your heart and pray on what it means for you and how not only you relate to your property, but also to the Indigenous folks whose ancestors were the first stewards of the land. So we're going to cover a lot today. First, I'm going to briefly introduce the Church Property Resource Hub because you're going to have the flyer. There's going to be a lot of press around it. So I'll briefly do that. And then we're going to explore the initial phase of property stewardship journeys, where we should begin. And then I'll share some resources available now to help with this first phase. And finally, I'll give an update on some ways you can connect with the Church Property Resource Hub with our various events and activities. And yes, lots of time for questions. So who am I? I'm Pastor Sarah Jones. I'm the program director for the Church Property Resource Hub. I lead the day-to-day activities to collect, create, and curate resources and learning opportunities for congregations and synod leaders to better steward their land and buildings. I am new to the ELCA, but I'm not new to this work. I'm ordained in the United Church of Christ and to the specific vocation of helping congregations leverage their property for mission impact and congregational vitality. I am also a Chicagoan. That's where I'm coming to you from today. And I have two other colleagues with me doing this work. Deacon Sarah Kretschmann is our fabulous communications manager. She made sure that flyer looks amazing. And Pastor Tim Brown, the director of congregational stewardship for the ELCA. We're talking about stewardship, so we kind of fall under that office. So the Church Property Resource Hub is a place for congregations like yours to explore how we can start stewarding these properties differently and creatively, best practices that are different than the practices we used 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because times are different now. So we provide practical tools like template rental agreements, tax guidance, and step-by-step guides. We provide opportunities to learn about new best practices through webinars, e-learning courses, and in-person trainings. We have inspiring stories of other congregations who are also exploring new ways to steward their property so that you can have examples of what success can look like. And we're cultivating networks for peer support through our forum where you can ask direct questions and get direct answers. And you can find us at elca.org/CPRH. Very easy. So we have resources that are connected to each of these kinds of themes in our resource library and in our success stories. These are things that we know that congregations are looking for. So space sharing, community engagement, legal information, mission exploration, property management and development, property transition, and holy closure. And in addition to the resource library, we also have engagement opportunities for you and your congregations to learn more. So we host monthly webinars for the entire church that focus on an aspect of church property stewardship and go a little bit deeper into that. We do visits, workshops, presentations at the invitations of synods. So that's what you're in right now. We do have the online support forum. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but we do have that forum where you can come, you can ask questions of your peers and of experts, and you can get answers to those questions. And then later this year, we're going to be launching what we're calling communities of collaboration and commiseration, which is basically like office hours where you can come and gather with other folks who are working through the same challenges and opportunities regarding their property. You can collaborate and you can commiserate. So before we really jump into the meat of today's webinar, I'd love to hear a little bit from y'all. How does your congregation currently use its land and buildings for mission impact? And what are the challenges your church faces in stewarding its property? And you can just jump in.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bonnie.
No, go ahead.
We are one congregation that worships in two languages. And so part of our work is sharing space with those who understand me a whole lot better than I understand them.
And Mount Hope, we have the Hope Ministries, which takes up our entire basement. What we used to be our Sunday school is now our pantry and our clothing for West Dallas kids who are unhoused or just escaped trauma. And we serve 900 to 1,000 kids a year. And it's really awesome. So we need a big area for that mission. And and we have it now. So we just don't have Sunday school.
Pat is muted.
So you need to unmute, Pat. So you click in the dark gray area, and in the bottom, it says mute or click that mute button and you'll unmute. There.
I'm unmuted.
You are.
All right. I'm from Unity Lutheran Church, and currently we have a meal program that serves between 100 and 150, one Wednesday a month. And then we have a soup Wednesday, and it's fewer people. And then we have bag lunches on the other Wednesdays. And there are even fewer people. However, right now, we have a clothing closet in our basement, and our building is not handicap accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of our problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, accessibility is a huge challenge in a lot of these old buildings.
Yeah.
But you can see that, even in this short time, we've talked about ways that you're using your property to embody the gospel and do God's work in the world. And we're going to talk about how to do that a little bit more.
So we have a great commercial and a kitchen that during COVID, we started doing soup ministry too. So once a month, we make loads of soup, send it out to people, minister to people where they're at. We also have many events. Again, we're in the boonies, so we need to bring people there. So we have a Bluegrass Festival in August, Ice Cream Social in July, Lutefisk dinner. I know you got a hankering for that. But one event after another, and the proceeds then, I mean, tens of thousands of dollars that we then give away. And then we do another thing at Child Smile. So there's all sorts of things that we do as kind of a hub. And yet, again, we've got plenty of land, plenty of space, a worshiping community that, it's a smaller sanctuary, so it's fine. But it's just, I feel like we're not tapping the full potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of us are thinking about how to maximize the space, right, for vitality and impact. So one of the things that I've learned over my many years of working with congregations and thinking differently about their property is that the congregations who are able to think creatively, imagine new things, and do new things, they are grounded in prayer and scripture, right? They understand their property through a lens of faith. And so one of the first things we did as the Church Property Resource Hub is put out a Bible study to think about property stewardship. And in that Bible study, we really wanted to help define what stewardship means. And we've taken inspiration from an old favorite, the parable of the talents, which I won't read and go into right now, but you know it. And so what we define property stewardship as is first understanding that the land and buildings do not belong to us, right? And they never did. Ultimately, they belong to God. But we are charged with using the resources we have to embody the gospel message, managing our assets with a faith-driven strategy towards the future of both church and community, and supporting our physical places in a collaborative and sustainable way. And again, this Bible study is on the Resource Hub, and it's a great entry point for your congregations to start thinking about property stewardship differently. So this flow chart is what we're calling a property stewardship journey. I'm going to put a link to the PDF in the chat so you can look at it. And if you squint really hard, maybe you can see it on your screen. But this is how we've seen congregations move from an organic, kind of haphazard property management practice to a more intentional, mission-driven, financially practical stewardship strategy, right? And the Church Property Resource Hub is here to help you move through this journey. Now, no matter what you end up doing, whether that's developing land or doing more space sharing or leasing to a new organization, or maybe even selling parts of the property, it all starts with this phase right up here. And that's where we're gonna focus on tonight. And this phase, that's phase one that we're calling, is really focused on 3 key goals. Understanding the finances that are available to continue to support the property, rediscovering the assets and amenities that the land and buildings represent, and reconnecting with the surrounding community, because these places are not just houses of worship, they are de facto community centers. And we're going to start at the bottom of that list just to emphasize that there's no hierarchy, right? You kind of have to do them all. So reconnecting with your community. Like I said, our churches are community centers. They always have been, but we haven't always managed them that way. And whatever happens in and to your property has direct and indirect effects on the community, right? So if, God forbid, the building were to burn down tomorrow, people beyond the congregation would feel its absence, and probably a lot of people, right? Think about all the groups that use your building. Think about all the participants, the clients, the visitors, the students, the audience members that those groups bring in. Your church is a community anchor, and we have to lean into that role. And part of that is recognizing that the community has a voice in what happens with your property. And so faithful property stewardship calls us to reconnect with our community, to rediscover our church's role in the neighborhood. And we do that by figuring out who uses the facilities and who benefits from the facilities beyond the congregation, engaging current and potential stakeholders in conversations specifically about the property and how it can be utilized for community benefit, and inviting partners into the physical space to show off what we have to offer. And I cannot stress that third point enough. You will have better, more generative conversations about your church if you have those conversations in your building, right? And so we want to figure out the answers to the questions: what community needs and desires does this place help fill? And who can be our partners on the journey? And these are some resources that are already available to you to help connect with your community. And I would suggest forming a small task force, not a committee, a task force to do this work and then report back to church council, property committee, like whoever is the decision body, right? So this first one, called Messaging Your Mission, is all about how to talk about your church is in a way that's accessible and invites partnership, right? So not everyone who comes into your building or will use your building will share your faith. And so you have to figure out a way to talk about yourselves that makes you accessible to people. The Building Community Conversations is a step-by-step manual for how to engage your community leaders in a generative and collaborative conversation about your property. And the Campus Tours helps you give tours of your building to folks who might be interested in partnering, which is a really good practice. So exploring physical assets. This is a really easy step for churches to just skip past because you're in the building all the time. You know everything about it. No, you don't. When was the last time you walked into every single room in your facilities, or you walked over all the acreage of your land, right? When was the last time you approached your property with wonder instead of anxiety? So we need to rediscover the opportunities that our physical structures provide. That means inventorying the amenities of the land and buildings. That means exploring physical opportunities for community partnership, right? What kinds of space do we have? What are they good fits for? Gathering real estate data on properties. So what is the zoning? What is the acreage, right? What is your property appraisal value? Most churches do not know this. And then identifying deferred maintenance needs and repair costs. And a point on deferred maintenance, if you don't already have a list of maintenance needs with proposed solutions and a timeline for repair, you need one. This is a great time to do it. And if you have a property committee, this is a great project for them. So here are 3 resources that can help you with exploring those physical assets. Mission Rediscovery is a great exercise for your church council or a group of members one Sunday after church. It's an intentional walkthrough of your entire property that is designed to spark imagination. If you have newer members, they are great participants for this because they are bringing new eyes and perspectives to the building. The amenities checklist helps you inventory all of the amenities that your building and individual spaces offer. You can notice seating capacity, AV equipment, natural light, rooms with good acoustics, all of those little details that help you promote your space to community folks. And you should just like have a list of all your spaces and their basic dimensions and their amenities anyway. And our friends at MIF, Mission Investment Fund, have recently revamped their maintenance audit. This is a quick DIY assessment that your property can use to give an initial picture of what your facility's maintenance needs are and what you should be planning for. All right, everyone take a deep breath. We're going to talk about finances. It's going to be okay. So buildings cost money. That is not a secret. Occupancy and maintenance costs are probably one of the biggest line items in your budget. These are also costs that are the most fixed. You can install energy efficient lighting. You can have volunteers mow the grass instead of the professional landscaper. You can reduce a lot of these expenses, but you can't cut them entirely. You're always going to have to pay for the property. What that means is when revenue decreases, the building takes up more and more of the budget. So when I see churches with a deficit budget, with gaps they're filling by drawing down on their reserves, it is almost always because of the building. Now, every single one of our congregations will move out of its current building at some point. That could be 10 years from now, that could be 50 years from now, but it's going to happen. We call that the property transition runway, not the closure runway. That's different. Just the runway you have until the only choice is to move out of the property entirely. There are ways to extend this runway, but we do have to figure out what it is right now, because that's the time you have to try something different, to change up your property stewardship strategy so that you can extend that runway. So we have a tool that we've developed for congregations who want some more detailed guidance in assessing their finances and calculating their property transition runway. We are kind of beta testing it with congregations now. So if you would like to be a part of that beta test, let me know. When this tool is finalized, we're going to strongly encourage churches to do this with accompaniment from their synod staff. So those staff will be able to answer questions and talk through some of what you may discover. So the big question at the end of phase 1 of the property journey is, how long do we have before the only choice is to transition out of the property? How much time do you have to try something different? And that's really important to know. And the big takeaway here is that your property transition runway is not the same as the remaining lifespan of your congregation. Congregations move. You might move out of your building and relocate to a place that's a better fit for your congregation's size and mission priorities. You might merge or consolidate with another congregation. You might decide to redevelop, restart, whatever Greater Milwaukee's term is for like pressing the reset button. All of those are reasons you might move, but not close. And remember, property transition is the term we're using to describe that moment when your congregation transitions out of its property entirely or transitions the property to a new steward. That's different than holy closure. So I just want to really emphasize that. So if you find out that your congregation has 3 years or less of runway, it probably only has time for faithful property transition. That's enough time to discern a move for the congregation physically and to find a way for the property to continue to serve the community and the mission of the church, to continue to facilitate God's love and work. That might be through its physical space, that might be through its equity. And the conversation about how your property can generate a missional legacy relies on the other information you gathered in phase 1. What are the opportunities and the assets that the physical space offers? And what are the community's priorities for the place? If your congregation has more than 3 years, so like 4 years or more, you have time to make changes to your property stewardship strategy to extend that runway. You can make some immediate changes to help increase your runway, and you can explore new models of property stewardship to see what's right for you and your church, right? So you can, in those kind of immediate time, you can say, we're going to increase our space sharing partnerships. We're going to try to go in with some other congregations and do a group purchase of electricity, right? So ways you can kind of start trimming the fat, maybe finding a little bit more income. And then as you do that, kind of exploring new models of property stewardship. Like, is there space for an anchor tenant on your property? Do you have like a whole education wing that you could rent out to a school or a daycare, right? Are you thinking about developing a social enterprise? Can you do development? Can you do a ground lease, right? All of these are those larger strategies for property stewardship. But all of this is grounded in discernment of the mission for you and the property. It always comes back to, how can your land and buildings continue to facilitate God's love in your community? So I'll talk a little bit about space sharing because I get a lot of questions about that. High-level guidance, space sharing is a great way to enhance the church's mission. Bringing partners in can help your church facilitate the love of God in new and different ways. The best space sharing relationships are grounded in shared missional understanding. The church and the organization see the arrangement as a way to enhance each other's mission. That also means it's a relationship, and fostering good relationships is key. These are not tenants. We are not called to be landlords. And all the nitty-gritty details cascade from these other 2 points. Things like space sharing policies, formal agreements, fee structures, even scheduling. All of those are details to formalize a mission-aligned partnership and to provide defined structure for good relationship. And we have resources to help your congregation do that. So there's a section of our library dedicated to space sharing. There you will find some how-to guides, rental template agreements, legal guidance for sharing your congregation space. We have developed a fundamentals of space sharing e-learning course. We should be pressing like publish on that in the next week or so. And that's an opportunity for you and your congregation to do a deeper dive and build those strong space sharing strategies and practices from the ground up. We have this, so here's a couple of resources. The first is a template rental agreement that was put together by the ELCA's General Counsel. So if you're looking for a good template to help formalize some of your space sharing partnerships, this is a great one. And it really is fill in the name. We also have this resource called Space Rental Strategies for Mission and Sustainability. This is the guide that walks you through how to develop a fair and mission-driven fee schedule for sharing space and how to develop space sharing policies, right? And then finally, we do have legal information, again, from our general counsel about how to use your land and buildings. And yes, there is information about taxes on there as well. I want to very briefly touch on legacy planning because that's something that every congregation should do with when it regards to its property, no matter how long your property transition runway is. Many congregations wait until they're at the moment of holy closure or when they've run out of money to think about this. And that is not the time to think about this. If you wait until you're that moment where you're kind of forced to transition your property, you won't have time and you won't have the capacity to do this faithfully. This is one of the reasons synods receive so much church property, because the congregation literally can't do anything else. They don't have the time or the capacity. So the time to start conversations about what happens to your land, to your buildings, to your equity when you are no longer in the building, that's right now. Every church should have advanced directives for their property. We have some resources forthcoming that can help you do this, but a punch list of tasks would be to review your congregation's constitution and see what that says. See what would happen right now if your church said, we're gonna move or close, right? See how well that aligns with what you actually want. Develop missional priorities for the property. What do you want the property to do when the congregation is no longer there? Who should it continue to support? And how should it continue to facilitate God's love? And then identify some tripwires for deeper discussion. This might be something like the next time a capital campaign goal isn't feasible. That might be when membership reaches a certain number. That might be when the congregation decides to call a part-time pastor instead of a full-time pastor. What are those moments where you know you're going to need to go into deeper conversation and start talking about how you want to ensure your property's missional legacy, because you see that property transition moment getting closer? And always, always, always engage your synod in these discussions. They want to help you figure this out. Every synod office I visited, every bishop or DEM or AW that I've talked to, they don't want church property reverting to them because they don't have the capacity to manage it or faithfully transition it. They really want the churches to figure it out before they get to the point where they have to offload it. All right, I have talked a lot. I'm going to sip my tea a little bit, and I'd love to hear from y'all. Questions you have about property discernment journeys, questions you have about the Resource Hub, or other burning questions you brought with you tonight.
So we just had a leadership retreat a few weeks ago, and we have a group that's ready to go. So they would love to go through the assessment and have somebody accompany them, walk the turf, walk the, and just really assess, here are our assets. Again, we have no debts. So we're not talking, 3, 4 years down the road. We're talking, God willing, another 10, 15. But still, with that said, this can be used now and perhaps even sustain ourselves longer term if we share, partner together, right? And there'll be other churches in the countryside that are going to be, God forbid, but having some holy closures coming up. So what does that mean? How does that involve? What can we do to partner? So I'd love to, I mean, whether it's with you, Sarah, or however we can do the next step, we're ready. We actually have a group that said they wanted to tackle this, and we're ready to go right now.
Amazing. So Tom, I'm in a couple of slides, you're going to see my email, but I'm going to type it into the chat also. Just email me so I have your email address, and I will send you the resources that I would say, like, these are the ones right now to do.
I really appreciate you reminding us to ground our discussions in scripture, because I think there is a lot of anxiety about the amount of time that we have and the need to do something right now. But remembering that for the long term, we need to go into a new venture faithfully and make sure it aligns with our mission. I had a retreat with my council a couple weeks ago, and oh gosh, it was in February. It wasn't. It was a while ago, and and we spent some time sort of meditating on our mission statement. We have a mission statement that they wrote within the last 10 years, but before I arrived, and we read it several times. I asked them what stands out to them and what is most important in that mission statement, because there are a lot of things that we're passionate about, but we're a small group of people, so we can't tackle, hunger, justice, and human trafficking, and like the whole list of things that people brought up that they are concerned about. So yeah, to be grounded in scripture and do something, but recognize that we have to put our efforts into things very intentionally.
Yeah. I would also say that like every church and pastor I've talked to who has been able to, like, do something new with their property, kind of like generate new income and new mission possibilities and everything. One, it took a long time. But two, like, they didn't start out with a strategic plan. Right? They were just like, okay, we know the next step is this. And then we're going to do some more discernment and see what the next step is. And then continue to, pray and reflect and talk and then see what the next step is. Right. And so, really being grounded in that process is really, really important.
The city of West Allis approached Mount Hope with the idea of using our fellowship hall as a warming shelter during the winter. And we are actively exploring that, gathering information, and it aligns with our mission. It just dovetails. I mean, it's perfect. It's really exciting. Our if that starts, so I think we're in the less than 3 years plan, and we are just trusting and letting miracles happen, and not being naive. Please don't get that, but a lot of things that we can. I love the exploring physical assets approach with wonder, not anxiety, and we need to kind of reshape ourselves into wonder instead of anxiety, and that's not easy, but we need to focus on that. That's very helpful.
And I would say also, like, this is where kind of the connecting with the community piece can really be helpful. I know a lot of congregations don't want to talk a lot about themselves or their own anxieties or their own insecurities, right? But inviting people like the city into conversation about like, we don't know how much longer we're going to be able to stay here, but we really want this place to continue to serve the community, right? The city is going to bring perspectives into that too, right?
Right.
I think about there's a church, Prince of Peace Lutheran in Hot Springs, Arkansas, that had been doing a lot of outreach to unhoused folks. They had feeding programs, they had done the warming shelter, right? And the city approached them because they wanted to actually build a home, like an unhoused outreach center. And the city approached them and said, what if we just bought the building?
Oh,
And did this. And the congregation said, you know what? We're really small. We're pretty old. This might be the best thing, right? So really engaging more partners and more voices and perspectives into those tough discernment questions. You don't have to do this alone,
mhm.
right? And that can really bring in a lot of wisdom and ideas and possibility as well. Right. I know that we're approaching time. So really quickly, I know it's gone by fast and I know everyone's got evening brain. So no worries if this all didn't stick. You will get a copy of the slides and there is going to be a recording. So there's a lot happening with the Church Property Resource Hub, and this is a program that's going to continue to evolve and grow over the next several months. So we're going to have new resources, new offerings, all of that. First, I want to highlight our e-learning courses. These are courses that you can take online, and each one is like a larger idea or a larger aspect of church property stewardship broken up into like digestible chunks so that you can work through them, right? So we have the Property Stewardship Bible Study, which is already up there. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have the Fundamentals of Space Sharing course. Again, this is a way for you to build a space sharing strategy from the ground up. And then mission-driven property stewardship. So like, what do church councils and property committees really need to understand about the property, and what are the key aspects of what their work should be? And then we have 2 of upcoming webinars, those monthly webinars that I talked about. So the first is tomorrow at 1 p.m., but this will also be recorded and hosted on the website. This is Church Real Estate 101. So we're going to have some folks from an organization called Foundry Commercial who do a lot of real estate with churches. And they're going to talk about how when they assess a property, what they're looking at. So like zoning, appraisals, easements, landmark status, why that all matters in kind of figuring out what to do next with your property, and then where you can find some of that data yourself. And then on June 16th at 6 p.m. Central, our friends at Mission Investment Fund are going to join us for a webinar on financing for property transformation, right? So what are some options to address some of the deferred maintenance or to upgrade or to renovate your facilities in a way that'll help you carry out your mission? And then I will be at the Greater Milwaukee Assembly. I'll be there on Friday. I'm not giving a workshop, but you can find me in like the hall. I'll have a table if you want to connect in person. And then we will be at the Rostered Leaders Gathering in Indianapolis this July. So if you're going to that, you can catch us there too. All right, so I talked about the forum. There is a new-ish initiative from the ELCA called Leadership Network, or LeadNet. It's basically Facebook for Lutherans, hopefully without like dumpster fire conversations. But you would know how to engage this. It's pretty much a social media site. You do need to register first, one-time registering, just like Facebook. You just got to register once. And then once you register, you'll be able to access different groups and events. The Church Property Resource Hub has its own group, and that's where you can find the forum where people can post questions and post answers to those questions. Okay. So I will make sure with a copy of the slides, these will be linked. So you can just click those links and go to the registration page and then go to the forum.
Perfect.
And then finally, the best way to keep up to date with what we're doing is to sign up for our newsletter. And you can do that on our webpage. It's a monthly newsletter. I think the next edition is going to go out next week. Each newsletter has a story of success. It has a new resource. It has events that are coming up, both events that we're hosting, but also webinars and workshops that are happening like from other organizations that also work around church property. And then you can always email us at cprh@elca.org. And then our webpage is elca.org/cprh.